In this lesson, we'll begin adding color to various parts of our skyscraper. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we finished up adding some small details in the form of this helipad here, and we also began planning out for sort of a parking lot around our building. Now, in between lessons, I went ahead and worked just a little bit more on the parking lot here, and you'll take a look here and see that really what I did, if we look at the layer structure that I've created here, we've got a layer for our building, we've got a layer for the lighter gray areas in the parking lot here, and then we've got this darker gray. And all I've done here is gone in and just moved that a few pixels just to kind of create the illusion that the parking lot is recessed down into the grassy areas here. And I've also come in and made a few changes to the shapes. And I tell you what, if you take a look at the project files, you'll notice that I also merged all these shapes together using the Pathfinder. So then we no longer have individual shapes here. So let's go ahead and get started adding color. Now, I just want to go ahead and preface this just by saying that, this is really up to you as far as color. I'm going to go ahead and just throw some really quick color on this. We're not looking necessarily for realism. The real course's focus was on the perspective drawing, so this is really just to kind of finish out what we started. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is grab my artboard tool because I want to center up my composition here. So you want to make sure and uncheck this little button right here so you're not trying to move the artwork with the artboard. If you move the artwork with the artboard, Illustrator will want to expand the artwork. So I'm going to go ahead and just move that artboard down just a little bit just so I can center this up. We'll go ahead and jump back out by selecting our normal selection tool, and at this point I think we're pretty much safe to go ahead and turn off our perspective grid. So I'll do that with a Control-Shift-I. Alright. I think I'm going to go ahead and first focus on these three protrusions and sort of the coloration of those. Now, originally when I built these shapes, I had created a masked object to mask out. If we double click on the inside of these, you'll see that I've got a group of stroked lines here that was going to basically create the illusion of windows. So I think I'm going to go ahead and add some color to that stroke at this point. Let's go ahead and make that stroke sort of a dark navy blue. Just set that here in my control panel, maybe a little less of the magenta and a little bit of black in there as well. And let's double click outside of our group here just to see how we did with that. And I'm not real happy with that color. I'm going to go ahead and add a little more black to it and a little less magenta. I want it to be sort of a cool blue. Alright, so we got those windows defined with some extra color. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for these other strokes. Now I'm just going to go ahead and use my eyedropper tool to see if I can't sample the color of the strokes that we've already established here. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing for this shape as well. Alright, so we're ready to go ahead and begin adding color to the windows themselves. Now, it's probably a good idea to establish a light source, especially if you're going to be incorporating value into your color and going beyond just flat color. I figured we'd use some gradients here, so I'm going to go ahead and think that my light source is somewhere up here, kind of radiating down onto this building. So let's go ahead and just kind of zoom in here. And we'll go ahead and make sure we're out of isolation mode there so we can get a fresh start here. Let's go ahead and double click on this shape here, and let's go ahead and double click on it one more time to go into the next group. And now we've got the group of strokes, but we also have a shape behind them we can grab here, and you can see that it's this color right here. I'm going to go ahead and replace that with a gradient. So let me go ahead and zoom out just a little bit with that object selected so we can see the entire thing. And I tell you what, let's come in here and change this to a linear gradient. Now, it's going to change the color here. Let's go ahead and grab our gradient tool using the keyboard shortcut G, and we'll see our gradient annotator appear on screen. I'm going to go ahead and just drag my gradient down and across, sort of like that. And let's go ahead and begin adding some different colors here. Now, I definitely don't want to have a black in there, so let's come over here. I know this is kind of hard to see, but I'm going to go ahead and shift-click on my color bar till I get to the hue, saturation, brightness sliders, and let's go ahead and make this a little brighter, changing the hue and the saturation so we can get sort of a nice blue color here. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and change this other color here. Let's go ahead and shift click a couple times, and let's go ahead and add a lighter blue. Maybe not quite that light, or maybe not quite that saturated. Alright, so we've got a couple of different swatches here. I'm going to come in and make some copies of this just so we can sort of create the illusion that there's a reflection going on here. So I'm going to hold down Alt and drag that color stop. And we'll hold down Alt and drag that one as well. Get sort of a nice subtle gradation that moves in and out of its light areas here. So Now it's just a matter of tweaking this up, moving these color stops around, adjusting our gradient annotator however we feel like we need to, and maybe even changing the colors by double-clicking on the color stop. So let's go ahead and saturate this one a little bit more, maybe even add just a hair of black, make it a little more subtle. And we can always exit out of isolation mode if we want to see the value comparison, kind of to the other values around that we'd already established. So, you know, looking at this, I think maybe my blue is just a little bit too light up here, and maybe it needs to be just a hair darker down here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back in there and make those changes here really fast. Like I said before, this is completely up to you as far as how far you go with the color for this. Having trouble getting inside that that group as far as isolation mode. So let's go ahead and use the isolation mode button up here in the control panel. And see what we got here. Let's go ahead and isolate this group as well. There we go. Alright, there's our gradient. So we'll come in here and just make this one a little bit darker, a little more saturated. I'm doing that with the CMYK slider now. We could hold shift and get over to that HSB one if we really wanted to. And let's go ahead and try that again. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I'll go ahead and darken this one up just a little bit as well. Alright, that looks really good. I think we've got our gradient settled on here. I may come in and tweak that up a little bit before the end of this course, but I think it's time to go ahead and replicate this coloration over to these other two protruded panels here. So the best way to go ahead about doing that would be to take this coloration and this custom gradient we've made and go ahead and make it a swatch. So let me come over to my swatch panel and I'll just drag that right here from my tool panel and we'll drop it in there, creating a custom swatch here. That way we can come in here on our next panel and let's go ahead and drill down in isolation mode on this one as well. And let's see, we'll see if we can grab that back piece. There we go. And we can go ahead and apply this gradient to it. Now, it's not going to remember the direction of the gradient. We're going to have to redraw the direction with our gradient tool here, but that's okay. I think we can get it fairly close. Let's go ahead and adjust that just a little bit. Notice here that as I mouse over my gradient annotator, we could also have access to the color stops from here as well, and it has all the same functionality as the gradient panel. Let's go ahead and undo that. Get back in here, and I want to go ahead and pinch this gradient in just a little bit. Drag this color stop some. Looking at this large dark spot right here, it doesn't seem real consistent with the one next to it, so just pinch this in just a little bit here. Exit out of isolation mode, and that looks pretty good. So I want to come in and make the same color change here for this object. Select that panel, apply our swatch, and just draw it down to create the direction of that. I may come in here and tweak this up. Maybe that needs to be shortened just a little bit. And drag down some as well. So there we go. We'll go ahead and stick with that. Let's go ahead and jump out, and that looks like a fairly consistent reflection there that we've created on those three protruded areas. Now I think I'm going to come in next and exit out of isolation mode so we can work on these three panels, or excuse me, these two panels right here. And I think that, you know, probably a gradient here would be suitable as well. So let's go ahead and apply a linear gradient. But we're not going to use the same gradient we just configured. We're going to come in here and tweak that up a bit. Let's only give it 2 color stops. We'll drag 2 of those away. And let's go ahead and redraw that. We're going to draw that at a down angle, straight down. And you know, that's not really dark enough with those 2 colors, so we'll come in here and change the color of these just a little bit. Let's go ahead and darken this up pretty good. Add a little bit of red in there, quite a bit of black. And that one's pretty good. We'll come in here and change the color of this one next. A little bit of more cyan, a little bit more magenta, quite a bit more black. And actually, we probably went a little too dark with this one, so we'll come up just a little bit here. Switching back to our gradient tool by hitting G, and maybe we could actually come in and shorten these up some as well. So let me just drag these down some. Shorten this one significantly by grabbing the little circle here. Alright, and that looks pretty good. Notice how I zoomed out just to kind of get a good overall image in my mind of what we're doing. I don't stay zoomed in that close for too long. You'll lose track of what the overall project looks like. So in this lesson, we've began adding some color to our building. In the next lesson, we're going to go ahead and pick up where we're leaving off here and continue adding color to some of these other elements in our building.